A small noise woke me up. It was followed by a flawed understanding of what had happened. Then, the fine details of the last 2 weeks seemed important. A fiery tornado, those 2 hippies in the VW Beetle, and the strange decorative lights in the neighbor's backyard. They all rushed back as I cringed under the fluorescent lights in this small drab room imprisoning me. In 2 weeks, I'll be charged with murder. But first I have to figure out how this door works so I can get my breakfast. It's too soon to bring her up. I should have something singular to say about myself instead of how concerned I was that yesterday's events would affect our relationship more than they would the course of the rest of my life. Some things are too hard, even with 2,000 miles in the cell door between us. We'll get to her later. But first I have to navigate this day in jail before I can allow myself to feel the pain I've caused. After oatmeal, canned peaches, and French toast, I went back to sleep. Morning inspection hardly fazed me. Once again, as I drifted to sleep, while my current situation seemed no more real than the dreams that occupied my overactive mind, suddenly I was rudely jolted back to reality by a guy out in the day room who rattled my door with the newspaper in hand. He was short and too gaunt to accurately guess his age. He wore his mustache as if he'd never seen a day without it. I never got his name. I never wanted it. "Hey, that's you. Boy, you're screwed," he yelled as he held up my picture with some sort of sick joy that he had lesser problems to deal with. "Artist charged with attempted murder," the headline read. I had the first taste of the guilt and remorse that would soon define me, but I only had a short rope to draw from this poisoned well. These things take time. I didn't know how to believe the reporter's account. I couldn't wrap my head around the exaggerated quality of it. It felt unjust. But at that moment, all I wanted was for this strange man to stop reading it. So maybe, by the end of the article, my sentence in this alternate reality would be served and I could return to her. But he just laughed as he sat on the metal table outside my cell, spouting off the highlights of the article. I laid back down on my bunk and tried to repel the reality that was obvious to everyone else in the county jail or at home reading their morning newspaper. Something was very wrong with Sea Stoltzner, and a jail cell was where he belonged. This story has 8 chapters, with 3 separate narratives. These chapters and narratives are woven braids. Consider each chapter to be their own songs, with a verse, a chorus, and a bridge. To keep things tidy, these narratives will be announced by a date and brief musical theme. I've given the 3 narratives titles. The Hour I Last Believed sounds like this. It is the verse of the story and follows the aftermath of my crime and subsequent recovery. The imagined rise and unfathomed fall of Cobra Industries is the chorus. It sounds much different. This story shines a light on the circumstances that contributed to the decline of my faculties. The meaning of life experience is the bridge. Listen to it now. It is a brief explanation of my young adulthood and the factors that developed into my illness. This is a brisk account of events. I've changed everyone's name. I make no claim that the many conversations are precisely accurate, but instead suggest they are in the spirit of what was said, as I recall years later. Keith Daly recorded the audio at his studio, Airplane Audio. Robin Stoner blessed me with the Mosaic cover collaboration. Dr. Susie Hazen, TCM, was greatly important in the editing process and support. There are a few others that gave feedback and contributed to the editing. There is a companion PDF with all the mentioned art and much more. The musical themes are all from different iterations of my band Metalluia. This book is dedicated to TXTX. I'm sorry for the great effort I put into telling our story, but it felt important to do so. Mosaic of Planes by Sea Stoltzner. Read by the author. Copyright 2026, Sea Stoltzner. Chapter 1. Out of all the days, months, and years, I expected more to happen. (2007 to 2009), an average me in an imagined but accurate vision. I stood 6 feet tall with long brown hair that reached the middle of my back, and my sideburns, as I call them, full cheek, 1.5 foot long, free-flowing rivers of glory. Old man glasses, Western shirts, and tight Levi's with cowboy boots pulled over the outside of my jeans. On my large frame, it was an intimidating yet comical look. All from the thrift stores, as I was always too broke to invest in new things. I smelled of coffee and cigarettes, unless I was giving you a hug where you'd probably smell the sweet musk of my deodorant too. Conversationally, I didn't require or give many explanations, but when stimulated by an idea, I could talk your ear off. I had a lot of introverted charisma and a surreal, disarming sense of humor. This energy drew many people in, and even though my inborn nature was to remain standoffish, I still made many good friends. People also liked to observe the joy I found in the things I loved to do, which I think was nicely summed up by an old friend. You're so inspiring, not because of your natural abilities, but because you don't know what you're doing, but you do it anyways. At this time, I lived in Nevada City. It's a carefully maintained relic of California's gold mining heritage, a would-be ghost town that nobody wanted to abandon. Small and contained, home of the arts and many artists, a great place to find inspiration and companions. To my friends in the Nevada City music and art scene, I'd become known as Cobra, a nickname that started as a joke then seemed fitting as my sideburns grew to length. I was at my core a fiercely authentic person who was always chasing his artistic muse, but I could always be bothered to stop for a minute, to have a smoke, and to laugh about something. During my late 20s, I had a lot going for me, but I was caught in avoidant patterns. I would wake up when I felt ready to, somewhere in the late morning between 11 and 12. I'd put on last night's clothes, grab my blue American Spirit cigarettes, an orange lighter, Burt's Beeswax peppermint lip balm, keys and wallet. I'd step out the door of the manufactured house I lived in, just up the hill from downtown Nevada City. Once the car was in gear, I'd light up my first smoke of the day before engaging the gas pedal and deciding where to go for coffee. I'm still amazed by a certain chain of events that got me free coffee at a couple places around town. Basically, I met the right people in the right order on my ascent to becoming a local go-to coffeehouse artist all-star. The regular baristas would tell the new blood not to charge me for my meager coffee. I thought little of it at the time. Sierra Mountain Coffee Roasters in Grass Valley was where I liked to start my day. If I went to Cafe Mecca in downtown Nevada City, yes, the coffee would still probably be free, but I'd get caught up in a random conversation by someone I wasn't yet in the mood for. Plus, I need a place to come back to in the late afternoon for a second cup. "Oh, hey, it's you," I said to the familiar girl behind the counter, unaware of her name. "Yeah, we meet again. Do you want your regular?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "You got any shows coming up?" she said loudly over the steam of the espresso machine. "I don't know, maybe. I'm playing with Eli next week," I mumbled, always foggy before my morning caffeine. "Art shows, when are you going to bring some pieces here?" she asked. "Maybe when you get some decent wall space. Everywhere you look, there are books." I tried to ignore the request. "Okay, I get it," she playfully responded. "Do you need anything else from me?" "Yeah, I could really use a bagel," I asserted. 2 shots of espresso and a large coffee, a little half and half, and if they still had it, a pizza bagel with butter. Most of the time, I'd have to accept whatever bagel was still left in the display case. In the morning, I can manage a little banter, but the real jokes don't start coming till after the coffee hits. With my first sip, my eyes brightened, and I was back in the car with new momentum and on to my second smoke as I drove to my art studio in Grass Valley. On its own, Grass Valley is a thing of wonder. It begins 2 miles south of Nevada City and is a more modern take on how to update the 1800s. Lots of schools, grocery stores, and a picturesque downtown. It's happy to serve the needs of the larger area and the growing population. I'd often fantasize about getting up early and engaging with normal, productive society, but it never felt right. So I learned to create my own rules. I understood that the great achievements of my generation wouldn't come from someone like me. I accepted that underground folk albums and half-attended art shows were the most I could hope for. I was okay with that. I hadn't set my sights any higher. Occasionally, I'd try to get to my art studio early to see if it improved my output, but whenever I did so, I'd usually end up in some leftover drama from the night before. I learned a lot from Jen. She was just old enough to understand what was going on in this world, and still young and able to be an active part of it. She never hid her femininity. She was always near her tarot deck. She had thick, brown, long, wavy hair, wore red lipstick, and smelled of 3 flowers at once. On the rare occasion when we'd hug, I would always be surprised by how small she was. She contained much sorcery. Yeah, I learned a lot from Jen. Cobra, I'm so tired of this. Drew and Francis were up till 5 this morning, playing piano and singing all sorts of weird lyrics. I could hardly sleep with those two yammering on. I was finally able to get to sleep, but when I got up this morning, I found them both passed out in weird places. I had to jump over Drew's leg sticking halfway down the hall from his studio door. You need to help me do something about them. Jen exploded on the porch while she bummed a smoke. Do what? I don't rule this place, but those two are sure on a run. We should talk to Cole, maybe he has some ideas, I told her as I lit my third cigarette. This was never a productive way to start painting, so I gave up and made my way to my dad's house in Alta Sierra 15 minutes further south, eating my bagel as I drove and wiping the remaining drips of butter on the underside of the driver's seat. Alta Sierra is a large housing development on the outskirts of Grass Valley. Out of a desire to get the most profit out of the hilly landscape, Alta Sierra feels like a maze to newcomers. With around 2,500 houses, it also has an elementary school, golf course, and a private airport. As I pulled into the driveway, my dad would somehow instinctually know I was on my way, and he'd be out front with a cigarette in his mouth. His hair was looking much grayer since he'd become a widower. Sandy would tell him it was just getting blonde from their trips to the creek, but we all knew the truth. He wasn't a picky man. He ate whatever was on hand, watched whatever came on the TV, and bought whatever coffee was on sale. He did, however, insist on American Spirit cigarettes, no matter how broke. He was a hard worker, a trait he tried to instill in me, a trait that would take me years to develop. He loved to laugh, and to him anything could be a joke. He helped build the house. With a government loan and support from my grandparents, we put down roots. I was 3, Starla was 1, and Sandy was yet to be born in the house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and an attached garage, the standard American dream. Over the years, we made it ours, added a deck, converted the garage into an office/music room, and ripped out the carpet to acid stain the cement. Or that was the plan, at least. It was a bit run down by now. The gate to the deck didn't latch anymore, which was fine. The more urgent issue was the missing board you had to step over. We were still missing a couple of the liquid amber trees that a drunk driver took out, even though he paid us to replace them. They were glorious in the autumn when they all changed. I had done a poor paint job in the early 2000s. The mint green looked fine from the street, but up close, my lack of experience was obvious. Funny, I still had some of the paint samples in my studio, and whenever I was too broke, I'd mix some in with the good paints. I didn't know if I'd see you today. Your phone was off, Dad opened with. Yeah, I need to pay it, I said as I lit up my 4th smoke. Are you in the mood for a little bit of running around? He asked. Where about? I questioned. Penn Valley. My dad snuffed out his butt in the black plastic ashtray he'd had since he started back up when I was in high school. All right, I like a couple thrift stores out there. Is it all ready to go? I asked. Yep, the clipboard's in the house. I also need you to go up to French Corral, he added. What? No way, that'll take me all afternoon, I said in an uproar. See, come on, don't buck me here. I need this shot. It's not that far, he told me. Fine, let me finish my smoke first, I said as I accepted my fate. The plan had always been to help make my dad's work life easier. That's what he paid me for. But I was a demanding employee. I protested every bit of work he put before me. Then, after a lengthy argument, I'd give in and go back into town to take a few pictures. He worked in real estate. I now know he could have thrown a rock and found somebody better suited to help him, but I wasn't a good candidate for much else, so the dysfunction continued. A couple hours of work, a couple days a week, I can do that. He'd have a pot of coffee going and some scraps in the fridge, usually leftover Hawaiian pizza for my sister Sandy that lived with him. I always knew I shouldn't, and I would get chewed out for it later, but that never stopped me from taking a slice. Before trying to leave, I'd rant about the minor social interactions that baffled me. My dad would smoke and try to get a word in edgewise. Then I'd ask which of his 2 cars I could borrow to get me back home. He had an early 2000s Buick and an early 2000s SUV. Before I left, I'd be sure to get a few bucks from my wallet and be on my way after a reluctant thank you. After buckling up, I checked the rearview mirror before starting up the semi-steep driveway. Good thing I did. Sandy was just getting home from her day at the salon, and I wanted to check in on her progress with something. Sandy was a fighter and a pretty young thing growing up. Life kept giving her reasons why. It was our mother's idea for her to go to beauty school, a tangible trade that met her interests. She enjoyed pop culture. She loved the life of Marilyn Monroe and the music of Tupac Shakur. She liked to wear bright, cheery colors to match her bubbly personality, and she often tried out different perfumes. If my calling was developing artistic concepts and Starla's skills were implementing useful information, Sandy's gifts were connecting with the real value of people. With Sandy, there was a lot to love, and I wanted her fingerprints on my next musical project. Look, it's not hard, once you get the flow of it, I said behind Dad's old keyboard. Yeah, I can do it now, but once you leave, I instantly forget it, a frustrated Sandy admitted. I know, that's why we're going to keep at it. I hit the off switch. Anyways, what are you up to tonight? Did you eat? I'm having the rest of my pizza. I think we've got something else you could heat up. Sandy generously offered me sustenance, not knowing I'd already eaten half of her dinner. No, that's fine. I should probably get back to town, but keep with it on the keyboard. I'm sure we'll come together soon, I said as I found the exit. After work, I'd grab that second coffee in town and maybe have a smoke with someone random standing out on the street. Then, when all excuses were as lifeless as the cigarette butts under my cowboy boots heel, I'd make my way back over to my studio at St. Joseph's Cultural Center in Grass Valley to get to painting. I never had a true desire to become a painter. After high school, I bought some art supplies and made a few messes on cheap, thinly braced canvases. I'd have fun for a few hours, making something colorful to put up on my bedroom walls, but it wasn't my calling. I was taking music theory classes at the junior college, and I figured I'd find my successes that way. I thought my whole life had progressed to be a serious musician, and I tried to play the part. The paintings didn't stay up on my walls for long. They got replaced by a taste for minimalism, and it would soon be forgotten that I ever tried. After the failure of my first album in a period of general malaise, I dusted off my old art supplies and with a newfound intention painted over an old canvas. But instead of rushing for some sort of artistic satisfaction in a few hours, I kept going for weeks. By the end, it looked like a very vividly colored cellular cross-section. The whole canvas was covered in a micro-pointillism style. I lacked skills but had a lot of free time and determination. The effect was colorful, fun, and entertaining, almost video game-like. I brought it to show my art friends at St. Joseph's third-floor artist studios. I got a bunch of positive feedback and a chance to sublet an art studio for a few months. With my foot in the door, I kept at it. Sounds like you guys put on a wild show last night, I said to Drew as I walked by his studio on the way to mine. So you talked to Jen, he said in a low tone as I unlocked my door and turned on my light. I got a text from Cole. They're doing drinks on the balcony at 7, Drew told me as he followed me into my studio. Do you want to go? I asked. I'm pretty hungover. He paused as I settled in. I think I'm going to walk down to the gas station, pick up a 40, and reconvene my thinking. I don't really have the cash for the balcony, but people will be downstairs in the bar after. I figured if you were going, I'd come along, he told me as he looked at my half-finished painting. You've done a lot to this one since I saw it last. Yeah, it's not giving me any trouble, I said as I grabbed the plastic cup I used to clean my brushes. I'll go tonight, but later. It's early and I've got some things to do. Since I avoided developing the necessary skills of an artist, the dots quickly became leaned on. I was okay with that. I had a basic understanding of what an outside artist was, and I was fine with that as a description when need be. I had no interest in getting a formal education in anything. It hadn't gone well for me in the past. I'd paint until I needed to eat something substantial, most often a burrito. Then go home, take a shower, put on a new day's clothes. I'd get in my dad's car, light up my 12th smoke of the day as I drove back to my studio in Grass Valley to try to get one more color dotted before the evening social event. I say one more color because I hadn't the ability to mix colors with any consistency. I knew the basics, and I would just start mixing paints till I liked something and use that till whatever pattern I was making was complete. It was common for me to be the holdup to drive a crew over to the bars in Nevada City. Nevada City is designed for two things, tourism and nightlife. All of its shops, restaurants, and bars are contained in a few short streets. Any time of year, the weekends are a busy place for Nevada City, so the weeknights had become popular for the local scene to meet up for a few casual drinks. This was truly an independent collection of friends, musicians, and artists. There are no official association of names I can read off. No one was in charge of anyone but themselves, but most nights, the word would be the same to meet up at the historic National Hotel bar. Drew was a singer-songwriter and audio engineer that, like me, worked out of one of the artist studios. He'd been a long-time frequent flyer in whatever beat-up car I was driving. He kept his long red hair neatly out of the way in a well-worn trucker hat. He He should have been a better poker player because he was good at hiding his emotions, even when he drank, which he enjoyed too. Once seatbelted in, I'd put on a classic rock station and use whatever song that came on as cosmic motivation for the evening. Since Grass Valley and Nevada City are only a few miles apart, we'd usually only get one song. Unless that song was sung by the Eagles, then I'd quickly turn it off. "Man, you've got to get over your detest for the Eagles," Drew pleaded. "I hate Don Henley, but Joe Walsh, he's okay. He's definitely the lesser of two Eagles," I said as one of my favorite punchlines. On a weeknight after 9, there would always be easy street parking, and we'd effortlessly walk through the double doors of the National Hotel bar to see who was out. Tonight, Cole and Francis were talking as they occupied the end of the bar by the payphone. Cole was at the center of Nevada City's arts Venn diagram. You'd always find his name in the thank you section back when people still made CDs. He brought a carefully planned vision to the projects he was involved in. He was a songwriter, guitarist, vocalist, and a producer. Cole, like me, also moved past the parts of the conversations he didn't want to engage in. Straight to the point. I liked that. Francis, on the other hand, was a creative free radical. He played in as many bands as he could, stayed out later than the last after party, and always saw the person in the corner of the room that thought they were invisible. Francis lived with morose feelings, but they never seemed to bring him harm. He loved movies, aggressive music, and board games. He couldn't escape having a thick beard. "Cobra, you're never going to believe what Francis told some girl working at the gas station after band practice," Cole opened with from the end of the bar. "I'd met her before, I just couldn't remember her name fast enough," offered Francis in protest. "Just let me tell this one, Francis. Cobra, you be the judge," Cole continued. "Well, what did he say?" I asked with a smile on my face. "He said that she looked sad tonight, and if she wanted to meet up in the graveyard later, they could cry together," Cole said with delight and maybe a little jealousy that he never made anyone such an offer. Cole and I laughed at the direct and solemn offer, but Francis laughed loudest, knowing that it would probably work out well for him by the end of the evening. From the corner of my eye, I saw Eli had arrived. I had to talk to him. Eli had a strong presence with his guitar. His brown hair was locked in a never-ending cycle of growing out until he was frustrated by it and haphazardly shaving it off. He was one of 7 children, and he had a family of his own, but he couldn't give up on his musical gifts. He was one of my closest friends. "Dude, I need a cigarette," I told Eli as we walked out front to the smoking section. Weirdest thing, I was talking with this woman named Charlotte at a show. I guess I pissed off some random dude bumming smokes off people because he spit at my cowboy boots and then gets in my face, I started my story off with. "What did you do?" he asked. "Well, what could I do? I had this beautiful woman standing next to me, and I didn't want our fists to start flying and maybe end up hitting her, but I also needed to be in control of this situation. I mean, he did spit next to my cowboy boot," I elaborated. "Come on, what'd you do about it?" Eli asked again. "So he's right in my face," I continued. "Yeah, you said that part already." "I know, but it's important to remember that he's 2 inches from my face, and we're staring each other down, but I don't flinch. I'm just trying to wait him out. But his breath stank, and I was worried that this encounter was going to ruin things with this new woman, so I intensely told him to get the hell out of here," I fiercely answered. "Did that work?" Eli inquired. "Sort of. He backed away, then threw his arms up in the air and started yelling that he could spit wherever he wanted to. I took a step towards him and told him no one had a smoke for him and it was time for him to leave." "So that did it?" Eli asked. "Not really. He got back in my face and I thought, here it comes. But right then his buddy grabs him from behind and pulls him away from me and the rest of the group. He kept barking about how he was going to beat me up as they walked up the street." I finished my little story. "How did things go with the new love of your life?" Eli asked me. It was dangerous for my pack of cigarettes to hang out in the smoking section. I had too many good friends that didn't seem to smoke unless I was around, and to whom I could never say no to. So when I could break free, I'd be back in the bar talking to whomever else I hadn't gotten to yet. John always made his presence known when he was back in town. He'd been living out on the Pacific coast for years, and as much as he liked the solitude, he was happy to see everyone on his trips back. He always rolled his own cigarettes. He called the ones from the stores tailored. John could be abrasive, or more accurately said, he could be too perceptively honest. We got along all right on those days he'd be back in town. Last year changed things for me. I finally started eating the oysters and clams on the cliff below my house. "They're pretty good over an open fire, and it keeps me from having to go to town when I'm not in the mood," John told me. Yeah, I've never really gotten into shellfish, I replied. You know, they're not bad. I've started to get a taste for them. If you ever make it out to my place, I'll whip us up a batch, John said as an open invitation to anyone in the scene. On occasion, my sister Starla would decide to make a weeknight appearance with her boyfriend Tommy. Starla was born 2 years after me. She was the most intelligent of us siblings and always knew how to stay out of moody parental crosshairs. She had been a committed, competitive gymnast until she was hurt in the 8th grade. For her, school was easy. Then came going off to college, getting a degree, and returning home to a promising career. I think she was a bit jealous that I still had dreams that I struggled over. She made things look easy. She loved cats, hot tea, and quoting old movies. Her favorite was Safe Men. That always put a smile on her face. Tommy was a very involved partner. He knew his way around a kitchen, too. He couldn't help but change the song lyrics as he sang them, and he could get magic out of a microphone and speakers. He had black hair, a warm demeanor, and stood a few inches taller than me. We had our ups and downs, but regardless of the circumstances, we always believed in each other. I thought they were doing karaoke tonight, Starla said with disappointment. I think the guy does every other Saturday night now, I remembered. Shoot, I wanted to sing a Beatles song, Starla sadly confided. Babe, if you want, we could go back over to my studio. I could get you set up with a mic, and we could sing some karaoke songs over there. You'd come too, right, Cobra? Tommy offered a solution. Yeah, we could sing Baby You're a Rich Man, but Marilyn Manson style. I spiritedly replied with the hope of getting Starla on board. That's all right, I can wait till Saturday. I'm supposed to get dinner with Sandy, and maybe we could all go together, Starla asked. Once the evening reached its crescendo, the talk changed from who's coming out to where do we go from here. Since I'd usually be completely sober and the reliable designated driver, I'd make a few short trips around Nevada City dropping folks off. Sometimes a dance party would break out. Other nights would lead to a low-key hangout with some freshly picked barbecued garden vegetables. But most often, the drunkest people would take a ride with me back to the third-story artist studios in Grass Valley and drink out on the porch as their talk echoed through my open window as I painted inside. Late at night was when I got most of my work done. During my smoke breaks, I'd look through my open window and try to figure out what the hell I was doing with my painting and subsequently my life. Once satisfied by one or another, I'd shut it down, I'd see if there was any tired drunk people left that needed a ride, then drive back to my manufactured house in Nevada City to have my 20th smoke of the day as I looked up at the stars. Then I'd collapse into my bed and try to get some sleep. 2011, late morning, Friday, February 11th, County Jail. With a case like mine, there was no question on where to house me. I'd have to serve my time in administrative segregation. This section had 4 cells on the ground level and 5 more up a stairway. There was a day room between the cells and the door to the pod officer. The day room had a shower, a TV with basic cable, a light beige plastic chair, a big steel table with built-in stools, and a book cart. There was a computer kiosk to order canteen items, send a message to the medical wing or commanding officer. It also had a microwave and a pencil sharpener. A small janitor's closet for when needed, an electric razor attached to the wall with a razor head soaking in a bucket of blue cleanser, and every morning the local paper. I was quick to learn the jail had a routine, but I'd be slow to learn what that actually was. Most importantly was the rotation of the day room. Everybody in the section got an hour out of their cell to use however they'd like. On my first day, I got the second block right after the guy who had read me my article. Without any warning, the lights in the day room flashed, and I heard a cell door slam. Next, a voice over the intercom said, "Day room," and my door lock popped open. I pushed my intercom button and asked what day room meant. After a short education on the subject, I thought what I really needed out of this newfound freedom was to wash all the gold makeup out of my hair. What I really needed was a shower. I had been given a small bar of soap and a pink towel in booking. Those will do, I thought. The water was good and warm as it should be. I didn't know that this would often be an issue. After my shower, I found a small black plastic comb in my box of jail property. I used this comb to slowly untangle my long hair as I tried to flip through the different cable stations. But everybody started yelling from their cells as soon as I changed it off the country music video channel, so fearfully I turned it back. Sitting there, I didn't feel the same electric vibrations as the day before. I wouldn't say I calmly sat at the metal table, but I tried to retain the strength I'd need to be an effective courier for WikiLeaks. The comb I used on my horribly knotted hair did little, so I switched to my fingers to try to make some inroads. As I worked, I watched the country music videos with some curiosity. I guess my recent life had insulated me from the types of culture most people engage in. Fine for them, but I found it kind of obvious and boring. As I looked around the room, the jail reminded me of the public schools I'd gone to, mostly due to the softly painted industrial building supplies everywhere. Yeah, they were of a higher grade, but everything looked clean and intentional. There was a cheap plastic clock hanging over the pod door. 10:45. I knew what that meant. I had 15 more minutes till I had to go back to my cell. I got up off the metal table and looked around with a bit of urgency. I was fine with TV as a babysitter, but this was my first realization that I didn't want to go back in that small cell. As I quietly freaked out, a man in another cell called me over. He wasn't much for small talk and asked me for some hot water. Without going into the tutorial, I got this man a cup of microwaved water through a folded-up Cheetos bag and only burnt my fingers a few times in the process. My reward was a shot of freeze-dried coffee wrapped in a clean piece of toilet paper. I used my tan plastic mug to heat up some water and then stirred my morning coffee as the lights flickered for me, and without any protest, I was back in my cell. It wasn't long before the pod officer interrupted me again. "Stoltzner, visit," she said. As a precaution for the staff and myself, 2 guards entered the day room and shackled my legs, wrists, and waist. Then I was led past the pod officer and down a short hallway to the tiny visiting booths. This took a while, and once inside I saw my dad, sisters, and Tommy waiting for me on the other side of the glass. I immediately felt all sorts of extreme emotions for my situation, and my only response was to burst into uncontrollable tears, the kind you know aren't soon going to stop. I sat down on the metal stool and picked up the black telephone receiver, put it to my ear, and started talking to my sister Starla, who had done the same. "Please enter your administrative ID and password," the pre-recorded voice instructed. With tears still in my eyes, I looked up at Starla with confusion. Starla pointed at the bright orange wristband I had on. I noticed the ID number and punched that in, but messed up a few times in the process. After finally getting it right, the voice asked me for a 4-digit password. Now I was so overwhelmed, I dropped my head to the metal table in front of me and cried even harder. Starla got up, walked out to the visiting area. A minute later, one of the guards came in and helped me, pushing some combination of numbers to get the visit started. "Hello, sweetheart. I want to let you know that we love you and accept you completely. And whatever happened, you're going to have to wait till you get assigned a lawyer to talk about it," Starla told me, with tears also in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened. I read the paper this morning, and it said I was looking for a golden sword or something," I began, as Starla interrupted me. "I know, C, but we can't talk about any of that. Are you okay? Are you hurt at all?" After a difficult and tear-filled conversation with Starla, and then sharing some brief words with Sandy, we all instinctually knew time must be running short, but my dad had something he had to get off his chest. "I'm sorry I failed you," he said as he struggled to fight back tears. This hit me hard and brought me back to the reality of what I was facing. I was much happier talking about Sandy's new kitten. Tommy and I got a second to talk before being interrupted. 1 minute remaining, the pre-recorded voice warned. Tommy handed Starla back the phone. "I put some money on your inmate phone card, so call me whenever you can. I don't know how that works," she said. "They have a thing where I get out of my cell for an hour," I told her. "Yeah, call me then. I heard they'll be bringing you into court soon. Just know that we'll be there," she told me in a hurry. "I just need to know that you're going to be all right," she added. "I'm not going to speak in code anymore. You're going to have to dig at it a little bit. I used to be alive, but now I'm a dead point," I said with a complete change in affect as the phone disconnected. 2007 to 2009. My life from the view of my mind. Cobra, I don't know. You tried too hard with people that aren't working for you. Do something simple. Make it as much about you as possible. The stage loves you and people eat that up, Cole told me. I know, I want to. It's just we're so close to getting this backing track up and running. It'll give the whole performance a cinematic feel. Then I think I'll really be able to channel a pure presence up there. You'll get it, so will others. It'll be a whole thing, I replied, missing the entire point. You're an authentic guy, Cobra, but you put all this work into trying to make people think you're something different, which never really works the way you intend but is always entertaining. All I'm saying is skip the middleman. Just do you, without the grand vision of who that is. Cole expanded on his message, knowing that I'd need the doubling of his point to counter what I didn't want to hear. I liked that my artistic friend group took over most parts of my life. It was a pretty tight crew of about 50 people with another 50 that came and went often. As I mentioned, this was not a group that lacked direction or needed leadership. As I made connections and developed as an artist, I internalized my role to be an artistic trickster, a coyote for the group to amuse in. From complex, lighthearted musician, pop art pointillist painter, daring stand-up comic, and conceptual performance artist, I kept busy with the above and made a lot of close, valuable friendships. Even with the different successes going on in the group, people found time to get together for a few days out at the lake, but you needed a boat to get to the forested campsite. Since this was everyone's vacation, nobody added any unnecessary creativity to the event's name, and the boat party was born. The excitement for the boat party rivaled that of Christmas for a child, and the highlight of the boat party would be walking onto the tiki bar on Saturday afternoon right as a stool at the bar became vacant. "Cobra, what are you drinking?" Cole asked from behind the bar. "Are you doing those blue drinks today?" I replied with fingers crossed. "One round of Windex, coming right up," Cole said as he sprang into action. "I'll take one too," Drew exclaimed as he turned around from the stool next to me. "Cobra, you're drinking? Better make it a stiff one, Cole. He's making up for a whole year of designated driving." Drew continued he'd obviously had a couple already. After a few minutes of light conversation about everyone's casual wear, I was passed a joint and took a hit like everyone else. Now my blue Windex drink would be set before me, and I'd take a sip, completely changing the intoxicating flavor in my mouth. And then quickly the change would come all at once. I didn't like it at all. It was a dumb record. What pissed me off the most was I was excited to hear it, and then it was just blah. I know you know those guys, Cole. I'm still a fan of their old stuff, but why'd they have to get so boring and obvious all of a sudden? It just pisses me off, I exclaimed after being asked. "Well, it's fine if you didn't like it, but people can't just do the same thing their whole careers. They've got to change and take risks," Cole said as he tried to talk me down. "But I liked what they used to do. I wasn't ready to hear something new," I woefully admitted. "Forget about them. They've been washed up for years." Drew changed the subject. "Cobra, when are you dropping your album?" he said as he threw down the gauntlet. "I'd like to do it soon. I just need to sit down with Tommy for a few days. I'm ready to move on to something fresher. He just keeps putting me off. It drives me crazy," I openly admitted. Cole topped off our blue drinks with the leftover in the blender. "You've just got to get it done while people are still interested," Cole told me. "Yeah, it would help if I had a little money. With these bro deals, you get what you pay for," I agreed as we moved on to a lighter topic. Even though I worked for my father, the idea of going into real estate myself hardly ever crossed my mind. I briefly took the Introduction to Real Estate class, but it wasn't my kind of information, so I dropped it and watched the business world from the sidelines. Between my light duties with my dad and the occasional job I'd get trimming marijuana, I got by, but with little margin for error. I knew my art was good enough to believe in, and as soon as the right version of my band came together, I'd see a change in my finances. It was just taking a long time to get there. "1998, a technical adult. My parents met on a Greyhound bus. My mom had just given up on college, and my dad had been living out on a hippie ranch. After a brief courtship, my grandpa insisted they wed, and my mom agreed. My dad was happy to just keep going along for the ride. They were both musicians. My mom was classically trained on the piano, while my dad could keep a beat on guitar and improvise on flute. Their journey together brought them to Jesus, then Grass Valley, and then into a Christian rock band. As 1980 rolled around, I was born, and then shortly were my sisters, Starla and Sandy. Music was in abundance at our home. It was often hard to find some silence to make some. But I was a difficult child. I struggled in school. I always fought my parents' authority. It was hard for me to give up and give in to the programs presented. I was at my core a rebellious child of nonconformists. As I grew up, I turned inward and avoided large developmental life decisions. Without dragging too much of my childhood into the story, I turned 18 at the start of my senior year of high school on September 11th, 1998. I guess due to my age, I should have been in the previous class, but even with this extra year of maturity, I was still behind in most of my classes. When I think back on high school, I don't remember putting much effort into my schoolwork. I happily allowed my documented learning disabilities to be the culprit for my borderline scholastic failures, but I don't remember trying all that hard. I always had good friends that looked out for me. I have a temperament that doesn't thrive well in groups, but does so in making meaningful relationships. It must all stem from the early shame of being one of the dumb kids that didn't allow me to open up more to new people. When I got older, I never felt comfortable enough with myself to pursue any of the young women that obviously favored me. I wanted to, but was always too down on myself over my perceived deficiencies. 2009, let the de-evolution begin. Fine, then tell me what I just said. If you are listening, it should be easy. What are we talking about right now? Kim shouted as she stood over me. I don't know, you were talking about your friend? I said softly, unsure of the correct answer. My friend? Which friend? No, see, we're not talking about my friend. Would you like me to give you a clue? She prodded. Yes, if it'll get you to stop, what are we talking about? I said boldly. Don't you yell at me, she defended. But you're yelling at me, I countered. That might be so, but you started this, Kim said quietly and intensely. How did I asked in the same manner. You weren't listening. I asked you a question and you weren't listening, she continued. Well, I'm listening now. What's so important that you've got to ruin my night? I told her hard as a weightlifter dropping his rep after misgauging his limit. Kim was too young for me. I can see that now. She brought up Pokemon too often. I'm more of an old-school Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan. She had the long black hair that was fitting for an artist girlfriend. If arguing equated with trying, then we were sure putting in a lot of effort to make it work. Watching my mom wither and die was heartbreaking, but dating Kim over the following year left me exhausted with little hope. Once it was finally over, I had to live with her tentacles still attached to my circle of friends. I'd become enraged when I'd get to a party or small gathering and see her car parked out front, and I'd have to instantly turn around and leave. I went to pick up my sister Starla from her house one night to discover Kim had started dating one of her roommates. I also couldn't handle the social media side of things. My response was to block her from my account for a few days, then add her back, then block her again. I was starting to see how someone could totally lose it by the inertia of a failed romantic relationship. But before things got too bad, I discovered a solution. Marijuana. One hit and I was cool with whatever she wanted to do with her life and quickly forgot that she existed at all. I started a new art project that I'd been mulling over for a few years and was able to regain my genuine laugh after hiding behind the forced white-knuckle smile that my sad existence had become. It started by me removing a half-inch out of the tip of a cigarette and putting in a small nugget of weed in its place. A few weeks later, I'd have a second midway through the evening. A month after that, I was rolling joints and needing a beer to help me fall asleep at night. Soon, I was smoking during the day and had completely given into the lifestyle of this newly needed medicine. I hate to say it worked for me, but for a short while, I was able to move on from the painful stings of my recent bad memories. "2007, The Lost Beacon. My mom had aged into a very spiritual woman. She was learning to play the harp for therapeutic purposes. She had a lot of ideas to encourage her children with. She had allowed her hair to go gray in her late 40s, and she had an infectious laugh. She had escaped the clutches of her family back east, but out of pity gave them her California phone number. I loved her cooking as all grateful children should, and I miss it every day. When my mom first got sick, I needed an electric guitar for some upcoming shows. This coincided with my mom watching a video on the law of attraction and getting motivated to fight her cancer with a new intention. I wonder if Bill still has that old Fender guitar, my dad rhetorically asked the family as we all sat around after the video. What, the Telecaster? I said as I tried to remember anything else about it. Yeah, the Telecaster. He never liked that thing. I think I have a picture of it with the band photos, he said as he left the room to look for it. Then my mom talked about the ways she could change her thinking to be better suited for her new journey. Even this early on, none of the doctors were giving her much hope, and it was inspiring to see someone committing themselves to such positivity during a time of such despair. I found it, exclaimed my dad as we returned to the living room. It is a Telecaster, but the pickguard's different from a normal one, he continued. Let me see, I asked. Once my eyes focused on the image of the guitar, I immediately loved it, but just as quickly dismissed my feelings due to the extreme absurdity of this request on the universe. Yeah, it's a cool guitar, but he wouldn't want to sell it, I said sheepishly. I don't know, C. You've got to use the law of attraction if you really want it. We all need to start doing it. Look at the photo again and imagine it's yours, Mom strongly suggested. 12 hours later, I was standing on the side of the road looking at the same guitar in the trunk of Bill's car. How about 6? He asked me. It seemed like a rushed decision. I didn't even get to hear it plugged in, but I was on my way to band practice and low on cash. Can you do 5? I asked. Minutes later, I walked in the door to find the rest of the band waiting around for me. Well, I got an electric guitar, I said as I opened up the case. The guys flipped out. I unknowingly got an incredible deal on a popular vintage guitar. I was more worried about getting made fun of for a misguided, impulsive decision. I plugged it in, it sounded great and played great too. The last thing I needed to do was somehow show my gratitude to the universe so I could continue to bask in these sort of blessings. Once I got home, my mother was just as inspired to see my success with the law of attraction that this new guitar became the unofficial mascot of her fight. Too bad everyone's self-defeating skepticism and darker demons prevailed, and the symbolism of my new guitar would turn to a lost beacon that once glimmered of hope. "2009, searching for my pillar of light. Now that marijuana was changing my thinking, I tried to redirect some of this energy into finally getting what I wanted out of my life, meaning it was time to use the law of attraction again, but for something better than a guitar. I was tired of watching all the happy and healthy romantic relationships around me. Now it was my turn to find someone special. I imagined myself as a pillar of light in the darkness, moving quickly as I passed other pillars of light. I visualized a diagram of how magnetism works out of a science book I had and applied that image to my pillar of light in the darkness. Now all of the other pillars I passed moved slightly towards or strongly away from me. After applying this method to my waking mind for a few months, I felt that she was close and about to draw near. How did things turn out with the new love of your life? Eli asked me. I'm sorry, I got distracted with who? I asked Eli to continue our conversation. Was Charlotte the woman from the show where you almost got in a fight? Are you going to see her again? Eli wanted to know. I hope so. I sent her a message, but I haven't heard back, I told him. Well, if you like her this much, I hope it works out. You deserve something great after everything you've been through, Eli replied. Yeah, I said. I think the universe owes me one. "2011, early Monday morning, February 14th. Just waiting in the solitary holding cell was as much as I could handle. The shackles were too tight. The guards had made a big show of force when securing them onto me. All I could do was continuously twist the tight handcuffs in hopes of finding a spot on my wrist where they didn't hurt. In the silence of the forced air, I found no spot, but with nothing else to do, I kept at it. My mind had to chew on something more palatable than what came next. There were no vacant seats in the courtroom, and many more were motivated to stand in the back and watch on that cold Monday morning. As I was brought in, I faintly heard that there were people crying. I recognized about a third of the people in the room and felt comforted by seeing the faces of a few friends, but that comfort quickly vanished as I wondered who the rest of these people were. I noticed a group of people up front who were trying to hold back their emotions. They all had the piercing eyes of what must have been my victim's family. I had to turn away. Lily introduced herself. She was the lawyer that would be assigned to my case. She told me that the proceedings were just getting underway and how to continue from here. I agreed. The court calls to order the People versus Sea Stoltzner on a charge of attempted murder, commanded the judge. How does Mr. Stoltzner plead? Lily stood up, walked over to me, put her hand on my shoulder, and addressed the courtroom. Not guilty.